Welcome to Today in History, our channel, where we dive daily into the most fascinating, weird, and mind-blowing events that have happened throughout time. In addition to our daily videos, we also delve into the lesser-known aspects of history, exploring the events and actions that have shaped our world. Slavery in America is a topic that has been studied, written about, and discussed extensively. It is a dark chapter in the nation's history, filled with stories of unimaginable cruelty and suffering. Yet, within this already harrowing narrative lies an even darker, often untold story: the abuse of black male slaves by white women. This aspect of slavery is rarely discussed, buried under layers of guilt, silence, and societal taboos. While much of the focus tends to be on the brutal actions of white men, the role of white women in the oppression and exploitation of black men is a story that needs to be brought to light. To truly understand this aspect of slavery, we must first step back into the heart of the antebellum South. This was a world where slavery was more than just an institution. It was the backbone of the economy and the way of life for many. The plantations of the South were vast estates where the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants provided immense wealth and power to the white families who owned them. In this world, power dynamics were crystal clear. White men sat at the top of the hierarchy, wielding absolute control over the lives of their slaves, their wives, and their families. However, within this rigid structure, white women, although legally and socially subordinate to white men, held a significant degree of power, especially over the slaves who were seen as their property. While white women of the South were often portrayed as delicate, genteel, and morally superior beings, this image was far from the truth. These women, despite being second-class citizens in their own homes, exercised a terrifying authority over their slaves, particularly over black men. This authority, often unchallenged and unchecked, led to a pattern of abuse that is rarely acknowledged in mainstream historical narratives. White women on these plantations were not mere bystanders in the system of slavery. They were active participants. The idea that they were passive, helpless victims of a patriarchal society does not hold up under scrutiny. In reality, many white women could be just as ruthless and cruel as their male counterparts when it came to maintaining the system of slavery. They played a complex role, one that was often contradictory, as they navigated their own restricted freedoms while simultaneously enforcing the brutal oppression of those even more powerless than themselves. Before we move into the next chapter, we would like to ask you for a favor. If you are enjoying the video, please support us by subscribing to our channel, click the like button, and share the video. It means a lot to us. Thank you. The power imbalance between white women and black men created a toxic environment where abuse, particularly sexual abuse, was disturbingly common. The relationship between these women and the black male slaves was not one of equals. It was one steeped in power, control, and exploitation. For these women, who often had little power in relation to white men, the ability to dominate and control black men offered a perverse sense of empowerment. This dynamic, however, was not rooted in genuine desire or affection, but rather in the assertion of dominance over a vulnerable group. Historical records and first-hand accounts, though scarce and often suppressed, reveal the extent of this exploitation. Some white women engaged in sexual abuse of black male slaves, acts that were not simply about physical desire, but about the exercise of power and control. The laws of the time regarded these men as property, devoid of any personal rights, which meant that they were subject to the whims of their owners, including the white women who lived in these households. This form of abuse was shrouded in secrecy, cloaked in layers of silence and shame. For the black men who were victims, the situation was a double-edged sword. Resistance was nearly impossible without facing severe repercussions. If a black man refused the advances of a white woman, he could be accused of insubordination or worse, assault. Such accusations often led to brutal punishments, including whipping, mutilation, or even death. On the other hand, compliance with these advances brought its own form of torment: physical violation, emotional trauma, and a psychological burden that could not be easily escaped. For these men, the threat of violence was ever present. The consequences of resisting a white woman's advances were dire. Even a mere accusation of impropriety could lead to the most severe forms of punishment, including lynching. In the antebellum South, lynching was not just a method of punishment, it was a tool of terror, a public spectacle designed to reinforce the racial hierarchy and instill fear within the black community. The very real possibility of being lynched for an alleged or actual interaction with a white woman was a constant threat that loomed over the lives of black male slaves. The fear of retribution for these men was not just a possibility, it was an omnipresent reality. White men, who held the ultimate authority on the plantations, often reacted with extreme jealousy and violence when they suspected or were told of any interaction between a black man and a white woman. This violence was not just personal, but was also meant to serve as a public warning to other black men. The message was clear. Any perceived crossing of racial boundaries would be met with the most severe and public forms of punishment. These lynchings, and the culture of violence that surrounded them, were more than just acts of revenge. They were tools of systemic oppression. They were intended to maintain the strict racial and social order of the South, ensuring that black men remained in their subjugated roles and that white women, even as they engaged in abusive behavior, were protected under the veil of white supremacy. For the white women involved, these acts of violence by their male counterparts served as a reminder of their own precarious position within the social hierarchy, a position that was only secure as long as they adhered to the strict racial and social codes of the time. The psychological impact on black male slaves who were subjected to this abuse was profound and long-lasting. These men were dehumanized in every possible way. They were treated as property, stripped of their autonomy, and forced to endure both physical and psychological violations. The trauma inflicted upon them did not end with the act itself. It lingered, affecting their sense of self-worth, their relationships with others, and their overall mental health. This trauma was passed down through generations, manifesting in the collective memory and experiences of the descendants of slaves. The legacy of this abuse is one of silence, pain, and shame. The stories of these men were often buried, considered too dangerous or humiliating to share. The taboo surrounding the topic has persisted for generations, preventing a full and honest reckoning with the past. Yet, these experiences are a crucial part of the narrative of slavery. To fully understand the horrors of this institution, we must acknowledge the suffering of all who were oppressed, including the black men who endured abuse at the hands of white women. One of the challenges in uncovering this part of history is the lack of documentation. The diaries, letters, and personal accounts that do exist provide only glimpses into this hidden world. For example, the diary of Mary Chestnut, a prominent Southern woman, offers a rare look at the complex relationships between white women and black men on the plantations. While Chestnut did not explicitly detail instances of sexual abuse, her writings hint at the disturbing and often contradictory dynamics at play. Chestnut's reflections, though not overt, suggest an awareness of the moral and social complexities surrounding the relationships between white women and black men. Her writings expose the inner turmoil that some white women may have felt as they navigated their roles within a system that was both oppressive and oppressive. While she stops short of directly condemning the actions of her peers, Chestnut's diary provides valuable insights into the ways in which white women were complicit in the system of slavery and the abuse that it engendered. Other historical accounts are more direct, providing explicit details of the abuse that black men suffered at the hands of white women. These narratives, though rare, are harrowing and heartbreaking. They reveal the extent to which white women could wield their power to exploit and dehumanize those who were already suffering under the yoke of slavery. These stories challenge the conventional narratives of Southern womanhood, forcing us to reconsider the roles that white women played in the maintenance and perpetuation of slavery. One of the reasons this chapter of history has been so often overlooked is the deeply ingrained narratives of Southern womanhood. These narratives paint white women as pure, gentle, and morally upright beings, who were themselves victims of a patriarchal society. To acknowledge their role in the abuse of black men is to shatter this idealized image, forcing us to confront a more complex and uncomfortable reality. It requires us to recognize that white women were not just passive victims of a male-dominated society, but were also active participants in the oppression of black men. For years, historians and scholars have either ignored or minimized this aspect of slavery. It challenges the conventional narratives of race and gender, and forces us to rethink what we know about power and oppression. The truth is uncomfortable, and it disrupts the simple dichotomy of good versus evil that we often try to apply to history. But as uncomfortable as it may be, this truth must be confronted if we are to fully understand the legacy of slavery in America. Today, as we continue to grapple with the legacy of slavery, it is crucial that we acknowledge all aspects of this dark history. The abuse of black male slaves by white women is a story that needs to be told, not just for historical accuracy, but for the sake of justice and healing. By bringing these stories to light, we honor the memory of those who suffered and ensure that their experiences are not forgotten. The truth is painful, but it is also powerful. We must face it, no matter how difficult it may be, because only by confronting the full reality of the past can we hope to build a better, more just future. The abuse of black male slaves by white women is a difficult truth, but one that demands to be heard. It is a chapter of history that has been silenced for too long, and it is time for it to be acknowledged. As we reflect on this untold chapter of American history, let us remember that the stories we tell, and the ones we choose to silence, shape our understanding. If this story resonated with you, it's time to take action. History's darkest chapters need to be acknowledged, not just as a reflection of the past, but as a guide for the future. Share this video to start conversations that matter and help bring these untold stories to light. Subscribe to our channel for more content that challenges conventional narratives and uncovers hidden truths. Together, we can ensure that the voices of those who suffered in silence are finally heard and that their experiences are never forgotten. Let's confront the past to shape a more just and informed future.